I don't like it that everybody's on their phone all the time, but it is what it is. And if that's where they're at, let it pop up on their screen and let them hear the message. And they can hide away in their room watching our videos, having their very specific questions answered. And then they can reach out and interact with somebody, which is the ultimate goal. And then from there, to get them in touch with somebody on the ground to make an in-person contact, launched one church plant as a result.
Because of social media, you've been able to plant that church in that area and also see more souls saved through that medium. Wow, I don't think I've ever heard of that before. That's amazing.
These are things that pastors want to do. They just, where do you begin, right?
That's been a great launching point. If you want to get into media with your ministry, I would say start there. Look up the
What's going on, everybody? Thanks for joining the Missionary Media Hub, where we offer training, resources, and awareness to missionaries around the world, enabling them to utilize digital tools to proclaim the gospel and expand their regional impact. Today on the Hub, I'm joined by Josh Mead. Josh is a missionary to Senegal that is not only using the traditional ways of outreach, but has over 700,000 social media followers, and he is reaching them with the gospel online. After you listen to this episode, you'll walk away with practical tips, insights for your ministry, and just even unique testimonies on the effectiveness of reaching our communities online. Here's a clip from Josh Mead and his ministry about how he is using this medium of media to expand his regional impact. Take a listen.
I attend a mission conference just about every week of my life, okay? I saw a video and I have never been able to get over that. And I want you to watch it. And it is one of the most innovative couples that I've ever met in my life. And Josh and his dear wife have done an unbelievably great job in reaching Muslims. We've had missionaries in Senegal, West Africa for many, many years, but very, very little results. But I believe that this team, Josh and his dear wife, has a great team, a great heart, an innovative spirit, and they're getting the gospel out to the Muslim world.
Why? Why should anyone hear the gospel twice before everyone has heard it once? The gospel must be given to all nations. Every creature. The gospel must be preached to every creature, every kindred and tongue and tribe and people, the uttermost part of the earth.
We have a calling to go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. The time-tested principles of preaching and teaching the Word of God transform lives and brings hope to all who believe. From the early church to our current age, the mission remains the same, but the task unfinished. Take the gospel to the uttermost part of the earth. The process is the same in every nation. Preach the gospel, the Word of God increases, the number of disciples multiply, and the church grows. But when you go as a missionary to a foreign field, the methods often must be contextualized to the people that God has called you to reach. Ndachte yalla dafa buga adina bajoche jendom am jimu am kep ingir kepakuko gum am dundugudujer te do sankumuk. We learned the language. We began building our lives in this country. We began to share the gospel, and God opened doors.
Dear Sunu Yakar, I recently watched one of your videos about Jesus and the lost sheep. I feel like I'm one of the lost sheep. My friend sent me a video of someone refuting the Bible and Christianity, and I don't know how to respond. I am having a crisis of faith because I don't know what to answer. I am lost. I don't know what to do. I just don't know. If I am one of the lost sheep, how can I know I am going to heaven? Go get your Bible and we will answer your questions. I don't have a Bible.
In 2018, we launched Sunu Yakar, meaning Our Hope, an online preaching and teaching ministry. The impact that this ministry would have in the following years was beyond anything we could have imagined. After accepting Jesus Christ as Savior at the Living Hope Baptist Church, I returned to the Casamance to visit my family in southern Senegal. After arriving, there was a young man there named Alexander Mendy. He's my little brother. As we were discussing the gospel, he asked me this question, "Do you know Pastor Malik Job?" Really surprised me, and it touched my heart. I said to him, "You've never once been to St. Louis, Senegal. How do you know Pastor Malik Job?" He said, "Through the social networks, I follow his teaching." And so we see that the teaching of Sunu Yakar is traveling all throughout Senegal. And I think it's very important.
Nous touchons beaucoup de personnes ici au Sénégal.
We interact with many people throughout Senegal, especially in big cities, big religious cities where no Christian has dared yet to take the gospel. We're followed throughout all of Africa, really, places like Mali, the Gambia, Mauritania, Burkina Faso, and many other countries. The majority of those who contact us are Muslim. Another part would be Roman Catholics who contact us and ask many important questions. The vision is that we would bring the gospel to people within the context where they are found, whether they're Wolof or Pular or whatever language, that they would understand the gospel in their own language within the cultural context in which they are found. And once they come to Christ, we would bring them here and train them not to leave their cultural context or their identity, but to understand, to teach the gospel and go back and represent Jesus Christ in a way that represents also the reality of the culture and the language in which they are found.
Every brick for our buildings is handmade. It requires the right amount of sand, gravel, cement, and water. Skipping any of these steps in the process of making these bricks not only compromises the integrity of the brick, but it will affect in the long term the building itself. There is a design and a process that God has ordained for His church and for the mission that He has called us to accomplish. Every step in the process of doing the work of God is essential. Every building that we construct will contribute to one aspect of the process of doing missions. Our desire is to see the Word of God increase and multiply in this nation, for the number of disciples to multiply and to grow, and for churches to be planted and established.
Based on what we read in the scriptures and your confession, what do you know now? Now I know that Jesus is Lord and the only way of salvation.
The field is the world. I say the field is the world.
So first off, just like, I would say, wow, just like so encouraging. When I first heard that video in college, I was like, no way, there's actually a missionary out there doing what like the Lord has put on like my heart to help people do, you know? And just like, that was just so amazing. I feel like you're one of the first missionaries I've ever seen that takes the leadership in this area, the plunge, you know, into the digital landscape, and as effectively, you know, as we can see, just effectively using these mediums of the social networks just to reach the lost and to share and spread the gospel to people that you may have never even, you know, seen or reached. And I think in your video, you mentioned the methods must be contextualized to the people God has called you to reach. Do you mind if you just share a little bit about yourself, but also, you know, what do you really mean by contextualizing the methods in your ministry?
Yeah, I would go back to the parables of Jesus. And as I went through the life of Christ, you try to learn from the best, right? We get the gospel from Jesus. The gospel is communicated to us through Jesus, recorded by His apostles and disciples. And Jesus loved to use story to connect with people, to relate with people. The goal of Christ was to bring us to God, bring us to Himself. And He used story often to relate truth so that we could comprehend it. It's really a great launching point. And so I've always loved storytelling. I've always loved story. Ever since I was young, I've been intrigued, not just by movies or TV shows, I was intrigued by the process of how one guy could come up with an entire story of multiple characters, give them dialogue, have a plot, put it all together, and then present it as a coherent story. You know, yeah, ever since I was young, even as I would watch films, I would watch not the film itself, but I would ask myself what's going through the mind of the creator of this film, the director. Why did he choose this angle? Why did he choose this storyline? How is he effectively in communicating the story? And later, I began making my own films once I realized that was something you could do. All you need is a video camera, and started making my own stories. Every weekend, I get together with my friends from church, my friends from school. We'd make a movie every weekend, and generally, I would just make it up on the fly, whatever was in my mind, and we would just act it out. And I got a lot of experience as a teenager, just telling people what to do, where to stand, how to act, what dialogue to say. And so a lot of that later, I would realize God was using all that to prepare us for the ministry here, to be able to not only use social media as a medium by which we can communicate the gospel to people, but to use it effectively by telling story. You know, it's one thing to be on social media, it's another thing to effectively use social media and engage people online in a way that they'll want to watch your videos. They're going to want to engage with the content. I'm not a big fan of wasting time of just doing something to do something just for the sake of doing it. And I think that's why we've been able to engage in social media, is because while we do draw on methods from the past, I think every generation has to ask itself, how is this generation communicating to itself? How is this culture communicating to itself? How are we communicating? And the fact is, whether you're in Senegal or whether you're in, San Diego, California, wherever you find yourself, this generation, younger generation especially, they're online and they're communicating to each other online. They're sharing their story, they're sharing life. And so, yeah, it really goes back to my personal experience of me loving story, loving to tell story, loving to write script and make movies. And then later, when I knew I was called to be a missionary, I wanted to learn how to most effectively communicate the gospel, and just drew on Jesus' method of using and communicating through stories. And so we would take a lot of the way Jesus would present the gospel in a way that was digestible. It never compromised the truth that he was seeking to speak. Jesus never changed the truth in order to fit the culture that he was trying to reach, if that makes sense.
Right.
But he would contextualize story to illustrate points. Later, Paul would say, I become all things to all men, meaning he wasn't going to allow his Jewishness to hinder him from communicating the gospel to a Gentile. And so that was another principle I picked up on pretty early, that there are a lot of American traditions I learned that I used to think were essential to Christianity when they were more or less just American traditions. And there were things I had to contextualize myself with in order to more effectively communicating the gospel. As simple as, I don't wear a suit and tie here. I wear a bubu, which is the African dress. And that's a real simple, easy way to contextualize how you communicate here. But it's profound, because we get these ideas that this is the one way we're supposed to do it.
I lost him. We'll cut that part out later. That's pretty. It's not uploading while he's going, but there we go. Hey.
All right, let's continue. Sorry about that.
No, you're totally fine. And yeah, can you just share a little bit more about the exact tipping point for, I guess, where that journey began for you in online outreach, and because I'm sure you shot all these things at home and you were doing all these things with media at home, but when did you realize that this is something I can do within the culture and for the context of the Senegal people?
Yeah, I always had a desire to um, eventually branch out into that. I hesitated for a while because I loved it so much. I enjoy filmmaking, I enjoy the whole process. And I honestly told myself, well, it's something I enjoy too much. It's probably not something God would want me to do on full time, not full time, but do it here in the ministry, which is kind of a foolish way of thinking. God wants to use the things you enjoy doing to reach people. So it was really around, I think it was 2018, especially after a national partner, Malik Job, once he joined our ministry, we worked together a couple years. I began to really sense his heart to help Wolof people, which is the ethnic group he's a part of. His desire was to help them, especially those who had become Christian, to maintain their cultural identity while being distinctively Christian. So, how do you navigate the world of being Wolof when a lot of it is influenced by Islamic context, not all of it, but some of it? How do you navigate remaining within the context of your cultural context, but then be distinctively Christian? So he really had a heart to help Christians navigate that, because a lot of Wolof Christians would be thrown out of their community once they got saved,
Right.
which is a natural, response when you're from a Muslim community. So a lot of them would attach themselves to communities of believers that were not culturally Wolof, and little by little, their cultural identity would erode away, and they would amalgamate whatever cultural influence they were under with whatever church they attended. So we really wanted to try to establish a ministry that was rooted in growing within the soil of the Wolof cultural context.
Right.
And so Malik really had a heart to help other believers do that. So we decided to start posting videos, um, just sharing questions that he would receive once in a while as a more mature believer about, how can should a Christian do this? Or in our context, how do we do that? So we just started doing 5 to 10 minute clips, and that started to grow. And we began to see that not just Christians were following, but Muslims were tuning in, Roman Catholics were tuning in. And then we did a parable. We took a parable. I always wanted to take the parables and rewrite them as if Jesus were telling the parables in the Wolof context. How would he tell it to the Wolof people while keeping the truth he was teaching? And so we took the parable of the Good Samaritan and contextualized it to, if Jesus were to retell it today in our cultural context, retold the story. And then at the end, Malik read the biblical text and gave a synopsis of what it was about. And that was our first video to go viral. People loved it. They tuned in. Everybody loves story, and especially story that relates to your own identity, your own culture. And so from there, we decided to take the plunge and kind of dig deeper into creating content. And that's when I started to not just develop more content, but to learn how to actively engage using social media to reach people here. How are people in Senegal using it? What's the demographic? Who are we reaching? Things like that.
Right.
And it was a process of time, but it was about back then when we started. And I remember the first year we were excited to hit about 10,000 followers after a year. And we thought, man, this is great. This is exciting. And then once COVID hit, I really began to
Yeah.
grow more because everybody was locked home. And we had people tuning in from all over the world, not just Senegal. People started tuning in from all over West Africa, people from France, Italy, even the United States, Senegalese, wherever they were dispersed abroad. And we started seeing a lot of people get saved. We were seeing people disciple. Christians were being encouraged. People started asking us to come to do Bible studies, to start churches in their regions, and it just began to grow. As of now, we're a little over 700,000 followers. We probably, I estimate, reach about 1 million people every month with our post, and that's combined, all of our platforms combined, with all the video views combined. Malik is constantly interacting with people through WhatsApp. That's our main means of communication, and a lot of questions that we answer, and about the gospel, things like that. So that's where we're at now. That's
Yeah.
kind of how we took it.
No, that's awesome. And I guess, where did you start with your social media outreach? Was that on what platforms, and how did you navigate through I would say, understanding the cultural differences from knowing what people typically listen to here on the States towards, or what they typically use in Senegal? Does that differ at all? Or is that pretty much stay the same?
Yeah, it's definitely so. It's a lot different. Social media usage in Senegal is a lot different than the States. For example, Facebook is used by a lot of Senegalese of all generations. You'll have our main demographic on Facebook is male. 70% of our followers on Facebook are male, age 18 up to 60. And you're going to have every generation on there. That's where we started, because that was the only social media that I had used personally. So we began to grow that. Advertising was easy. I could post a video, spend $5 and get 100,000 views to get it launched, and then it would just grow from there. So that's where we spent the first probably 2 or 3 years. We just kind of camped out on Facebook. After that, TikTok started around COVID. So I just started posting because Senegalese jumped on it right away, and I saw it was growing. It was more controversial in the States, but here in Senegal, I didn't see what the hype was about the controversy. The algorithm, we're a pretty conservative country. It's Muslim. Not a lot of nonsense is being posted and shared. And so we started posting clips of Jesus film, of Malik's teaching. That began to grow quite rapidly and organically. And then during that time, I opened up a personal page, which began to grow quite rapidly, of just a white guy who speaks Wolof. So that's kind of a niche. So that began to grow rapidly. So I would begin to do my own post, which includes biblical text. I'll do Bible stories, but also just life here. I began to do restaurant reviews, business reviews. If I travel, I'll post where we're traveling, food I eat, things like that. And so that's allowed me to begin to
a blog feel for you? Is
that kind of like
what was your
it's
strategy,
more
I guess, behind?
Yeah, it's more of it's life. So basically, when I started my personal page, our philosophy of ministry here is that God hasn't called us to build a work here in Senegal. He's called us to build our lives in Senegal. And the work will flow from a life surrendered to Him. So as we just live in Senegal, as any Christian would, the ministry will kind of build through it. And so I just approached it with my social media that way, just sharing life, So one day I might post a Bible verse in Wolof. The next day I might post a silly video, maybe, act out a sketch. It's kind of, with all of the social media I would do, it was my way of kind of an outlet, a creative outlet, where if I had a sketch idea, then I could post it. So that started to go viral. But then it also, I began to see how not only through the gospel pages that we started allow us to interact with people with the gospel, but my personal page allowed me to begin to make interaction with people all over. If I go out in public, usually everywhere I go, no matter what city or wherever I am at here in Senegal, people know, they recognize me, they'll come up, they want to get selfies, they want to learn more. And so it opens up doors of interaction constantly with people. And then businesses will ask me to do reviews of their, maybe a restaurant, small businesses. I'll do promotions for them, things like that. So it allows me to build relationships within the community that maybe I otherwise wouldn't have been able to by any other means. And so that began to grow. Then we started to launch out into other languages. We work in 2 other languages right now, and we got 3 more on the docket that I'm getting set to launch here soon. So,
Oh wow, oh that was awesome. And I guess kind of on that note, when it's interesting how you're using not only just the avenue of your own testimony on social media, where you're just, hey, this is my life, you're bringing people into your life, but also you're using it as a channel to communicate truth through your other platforms as well. And I guess on that note, as this tool of media continues to rise, what would you say is I guess, why is it such a powerful tool for spreading the gospel in this day and age?
I think media, it's powerful because it allows you can be very deliberate in what you want to say, right? It can be dangerous in that you can say something and then it's out there forever. Maybe you post a video, your spirit has to be right. You have to make sure that you communicate effectively. But what's great about media, video, audio, is that you can edit it, you can make it concise, you can address specific topics, and it's not just answering one person. It's answering questions that millions of people have. But in the Islamic world, maybe they're afraid to ask. They don't know who to ask. And if they do ask it, a lot of times they get shut down for questioning. And so media in the Islamic context, it offers a safe place, safe space for young people to go to ask these questions that they have about their own faith system and then other faith systems, specifically Christianity. And they can hide away in their room watching our videos, having their very specific questions answered. And then they can reach out and interact with somebody, which is the ultimate goal, is to get them in touch with Malik. And then from there, to get them in touch with somebody on the ground to make an in-person contact, and eventually to start churches as a result, which we've already begun to do. We've already launched 1 church plant as a result of our social media presence. And so, yeah, it's effective because, 1, people are there. People are online. I just was downtown yesterday, and I passed a group of 10 teenagers, and just like America, every one of these kids were sitting on the front porch, every one of them with a phone in their hand, just standing there staring at it. And so it is what it is. I don't like it that everybody's on their phone all the time, but it is what it is. And if that's where they're at, then I'd like to get the gospel in front of them, let it pop up on their screen, and let them hear the message. Yeah.
That is so key. Really just being able to reach, when I feel like when people have a question about faith, and even if they grow up in a Muslim home, or they may even fear asking, about, these questions of doubt that they're having, where do they go? Right? They go to their Google, they go to their phone, and they in their own private, search, and they kind of try to discover what, for themselves, what truth is, or what the answer to their questions they may even be ashamed to ask. And so vital for in your region, being able to utilize, the tool of search engine optimization to, just the creating the following, sharing things with other friends, just the power, the impact of these little gospel tracks almost, so you can be sharing with people virtually, is so unique. And I guess, how does that contrast, I guess, to the traditional methods that we are currently using and continue to use, as we add this method upon our outreach to the culture?
Yeah, it needs to figure, we try to, with our ministry, figure out a way in which we can use the tool of social media. And the way I like to phrase it is, social media is probably the most effective means by which we generate initial contact with Muslims. Anybody who works in Islamic evangelism understands that in order to even be able to share your faith, there's so many obstacles that have to be overcome in the mind and heart of a Muslim. So much they've been taught and lied to about concerning Christ, concerning the gospel, the Bible, that these questions need to be addressed, and it takes time. And you have to build trust, you have to build relationship. And what social media allows you to do is you still want to build relationship, but maybe somebody who's out in the middle of a village that you personally may never be able to reach one-on-one, they're going to get those questions answered, and those obstacles or those barriers are going to get torn down before you even engage in a personal relationship. And as God is working in their life, maybe they've spent time in their village watching these videos, they've had these questions answered, and then they come to this city, for example, and they meet one of us, or they meet a Christian, and they're already that much closer and open to receiving the gospel when the traditional methods are used, which are just building relationship, passing them a tract, sitting down for tea and discussing the gospel. So we use it to augment the calling of God to reach people, but we still emphasize building relationships. And eventually the goal is not just to have a large social media presence, but to see Bible studies at churches established as a result of people being discipled and led to Christ through the online ministry. And so we try to strategize and work at creating. That's a lot what we're doing over the next couple of years, is working on in that area.
Wow, that is great. And I think, is this something you would say that's only for like the working for like the Muslim culture or your current content, or is this for every missionary you encourage to take a step in this direction, to start utilizing some form of social media? Or are there concerns that you may say this is not for everybody, what we're doing, and maybe there's a level of moderation that a missionary can do? Or what do you say to that?
Yeah, while we were in the States, there were a couple churches when we were updating on our furlough. For the past few years, I didn't emphasize a lot our social media outreach, our media outreach, because I didn't want to give off the impression that that's primarily what we're doing, because it's one of the many tools we use in our church planting ministry. But albeit it's a very effective tool here. In Africa in general, I think any missionary in Africa should learn to use it one way or another, or find men and women in their community, because churches are going to learn to use it. Ministries, most of the guys that are online and utilize social media in African countries that are already Christian per se, are more charismatic leaning. And so they already have that personality that can go from, it's not easy to get behind a camera and talk to nobody. Some people have that personality. And so, it's not for everybody to get behind a camera or in front of a camera and speak. And not everybody's gifted to get behind a camera and direct a film or create story. And so don't do it I would say avoid it unless you have some working knowledge, or you've got somebody in your ministry that has the desire that wants to develop in it, that wants to grow and use it. But I would say figure it out. There were churches in the States we were in that one church in Pennsylvania, they'll do on Friday or Saturday, they'll do a quick excerpt that they'll post as a reel on their Facebook page, and just explaining what, here's the upcoming message. This is what the theme is going to be. Hope you'll be out there if you have any questions. So it's kind of just gets people prepared for the Sunday service. Other churches I was at, they would do a podcast on Mondays recapping the morning service message. I thought that was a great idea. So anything to keep the message in front of people, if that's where your people are, if you have men and women in your church, men driving to work and they're listening to podcasts, then start a podcast. Get the message out there. If you got women at home who are watching video blogs or whatever else, then start a blog and know who you're reaching and cultivate content that reaches them. Learn, so those are things that here in Senegal, it was a little more easier to figure out what people enjoy listening to because it's a very religious country. And so posting religious content, it's a draw to people here, especially if it's in the Wolof language.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess let's say I'm a missionary, right? And I'm like, well, how do I navigate what my people listen to? How do I know, what figure out what if I should start a podcast or if I shouldn't, and if I want to, how do I either find that resource or know how to, technically navigate that world. If somebody's struggling with that, I know there's like YouTube and there's a lot of other resources out there. But what did in your development stage and how you got to where you're at now? Was there any inspiration or people you followed or other resources that you used that may be a help to a missionary that's listening to this?
Yeah, so one, I would say draw off what you've learned about the culture. So one effective way to use media is just answering commonly asked questions. So
Yep.
always try to employ, as the missionary, if you're going to go online and be the white guy or what, if you're a foreign missionary, try to use
Yeah.
whatever language you learned. If it's not, French or English, if your country has a national language that you learned, we learned Wolof, then use that. And then just find a theme, find something you're passionate about that the people in your church enjoy listening to you talk about. Commonly asked questions in your country. Well, what about this? And just put together Q&A. People love question and answers, so do that.
Yeah.
There's another guy here in Senegal. He's a missionary who grew up in East Africa. We connected online about a year and a half ago. He was watching some of my videos when he first moved here, and he was getting really inspired by, hey, here's a white missionary, and he's doing videos online. He's connecting with people, and he's just sharing life. So as he was learning the Wolof language, he was interacting with somebody on the street, and somebody was secretly recording him. Well, then they uploaded it, and this video went viral of this random white guy speaking Wolof. So he thought, well, maybe I'll just start making videos like Dauda, which is my name here. So he started posting videos. I love what he does. So he'll take Proverbs of Solomon, so Proverbs from the Old Testament, and then with his national language partner, he'll put together little sketch ideas that are humorous, about the way you eat, whether you use left hand, right hand, the way people interact with their last names. And he'll take some of the cultural tensions, things like that he's learning about the culture that are humorous cultural points. And then he'll act it out. And then at the end, he'll put a proverb to it. Oh, yeah, Solomon said this. And it sheds light on that cultural situation that he just acted out. And he does a fantastic job at that. So the key is know the context of the people you're reaching. Tell a story. If you enjoy acting out or doing sketches, then use that and find a national partner that you trust that can help you navigate the communication of what you're trying to say. Sometimes I'll send a video to Malik, who's our national pastor. I'll send it to him before I post it to say, hey, just want to make sure this isn't too insensitive, that I'm not crossing the line here. Want to make sure that this makes sense. And he'll say,
Really
no, that's good. Or he'll say, maybe don't say it that way. You might want to say it this way. So anyways, yeah.
That is really smart. And I guess on that same topic, when it comes to integrating media in their ministry, would you say, what have you guys done in the areas of consistency, quality? I know you were mentioning a lot of story and kind of the content within like the audience needs and how you share certain elements. But when it comes to just the algorithm Would you say that is pretty consistent across the board when it comes to like the YouTube channel in Africa? Is that the same in America, or is that kind of where you say that kind of all differs in the algorithm aspects of the analytics?
Yeah, it would. Yeah, it definitely. I would say it definitely differs.
Mm.
Um, so I guess, like for example, TikTok. That one is we've seen the most organic growth on TikTok and Instagram. My personal page, there's the most organic growth was on Instagram. The ministry side, the Suni Yakar didn't grow. It hasn't grown as organically. For TikTok, all of the platforms, they've grown pretty organically. And I found that, and I think I love the videos, and it's a good starting point if you're a missionary. Most missionaries have used the Jesus film in the past, and some still use it today to share the gospel. Well, they made a new updated version. It's called Lumo, Lumo. So if you were to go on YouTube and type Lumo Gospel, it's distributed by Lionsgate Media. But what I learned about with Africa specifically is that you could take certain clips, and whether it's Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, you could share clips from this Jesus film. It just any monetization, like we're monetized on a lot of our platforms, but we don't receive any revenue from them because a lot of what we share is this Jesus film, which is simply the life of Jesus, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, being acted out by Middle Eastern actors. And it's just chapter by chapter of the Gospels. What I love about it is you could take any translation of any local language and put it to it. So they have multiple languages available already. They didn't have Wolof, so I took a Wolof audio Bible and I put it to the videos. So I did that during COVID. So I had a lot of free time during COVID. So I took all of the Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, edited it. I put audio to it with royalty-free music and all of that. And I
Yeah.
started to post it. And so you just have to learn where you're at. You just got to know what the copyright rules are. So the way it works with this Lumo Gospel is if I post a 10-minute clip on Facebook, then Lionsgate gets the revenue if there's any revenue, but it allows me to post it without any strike against it. And so a lot of times
Oh
we'll
wow.
live stream the video. We can live stream the video and it will block it in 7 countries like America, Canada, and parts of Europe, but it allows it to be
Right.
shown. So to me, YouTube, Facebook, I can't live stream that video. The same video, I can't live stream it on YouTube, but I can post short clips. So you just got to figure out what the copyright rules are to make sure you're not getting strikes.
Yeah.
But if the copyright allows it, and companies have learned, okay, we're going to let you post this video, but we're going to get the credit for it, and we'll get any monetization will come to them. So they allow it to be posted. So you're not posting those
Right.
videos. So I would say if you're any country you're a missionary in, it's a very effective tool because people, especially Muslims, they love these videos. It's just the gospel being shared. And then a lot of times we can do a follow-up with that on, okay, what was this chapter talking about? Do you have any questions about it? Let's interact with it. So that's been a great launching point. If you want to get into media with your ministry, I would say start there. Look up the Lumo Gospel Series and figure out, okay, is it already in a local language that I'm ministering to? If not, figure out how to download it, put it onto a media software, find an audio Bible that's already in your language, put the audio to it, and then post it on the different platforms you want to use. And you can learn how to use all that. YouTube will teach you how to do all that.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, you were mentioning like copyright and monetization. I was like, I'm gonna probably just say, like, guys, in the description below, I'm kind of include like a little video, so you guys don't need to search around for it, like what these things, what is he talking about right here? And then for those that are kind of that's new terms for you, we kind of want to try to help bring a hub of resources in a sense for everybody, so that they can find what they're looking for in the training and just the awareness as well, to what is possible through these free tools online. And I guess on that note, as you mentioned Lumen Gospel, are there any other specific tools or platforms that you have particularly found effective in your missionary work, either free or just like either what you mentioned, like royalty-free music, other things like that a missionary may find helpful and effective in even just brainstorming different ideas, as Lumen Gospel you mentioned?
Yeah, I've been Video Hive is a resource I'll use a lot. I think I forget if it's a subscription base or if you buy it, you have to buy it. There are free resources. A lot of times in the past, I would just go on YouTube and use some of their resources. They have copyright audio that you can access. Um, yeah, other than that, a lot of the content is stuff that we'll try to create ourselves, or I'll um, use this video. If you're going to use somebody else's content, you either want to make sure you get express permission. So there's another video series that I would use that in the past I would edit it, I would take clips from it and post it on our platforms. But then as their ministry grew, they hired a lawyer who then was able to put copyrights on all of their material, which is understandable. There's no, that's a good thing. So it's not just being used by whoever. And so they just produced another series in a language that we work in. So I posted it on YouTube, and it flagged it. It allowed me to post it, but it flagged it as copyrighted, which it had never done in the past. And then they reached out automatically through their lawyer with kind of like, what are you doing? Why are you posting our stuff without permission? And so now I had gotten permission from the president of this mission years ago to use their material, but they updated everything and revamped everything. And so we got in touch, and I said, hey, I'm not trying to, steal your work or anything. I'm basing this on 3 years ago, a conversation I had and permission I had gotten, but let's get everything, written form. So just make sure you have permission of whoever you're using. But again, there's different rules in different countries. Right. So like Facebook or YouTube, you could take, I forget what's the term they use, like free use. You could take a clip of a movie, and as long as you change enough of it, you can edit it and you can post it without it, being a strike against your page. I would only say with TikTok, you do have to be careful sometimes if it's a controversial topic. Sometimes you'll get flagged for no reason. They might try to shut down the site. TikTok can be frustrating sometimes because they're very sensitive with what's being posted. They want to indoctrinate your kids in the whole LGBTQ movement, but if you post something about Jesus, you just never know what's going to happen. And so, yeah. Anyways, other than that, for resources,
the online persecution.
Yeah, exactly. I use CapCut on my iPhone. That's how I edit all my videos on my iPhone. I'm switching from Adobe Premiere. I do use that. It is a subscription base, but I'm switching over to DaVinci, and I'm starting to learn how to use that. And I would say buy DaVinci now before it becomes a subscription base. I think it's $200. You get the full thing with access to everything. So I would say get that now before they switch over to a subscription base. But yeah,
let's go ahead and just take a quick break here, and we'll just be back in a little bit. So anyway, we're back. Thank you so much just for staying with us, if you stay with us this far. And so Josh, I just want to turn this over to you, and can you just recap a little bit about, how you started your struggles and realization of, we can actually start using this medium of media, and then kind of just focus on how you built a team in Senegal, how you built a team with the natives there, and creating consistent quality content. What does that look like within your ministry?
Yeah, when we started, as I've already mentioned before, there was just kind of how do I manage my time? There's time management issues there. You got to figure out, okay, what do I have time for? When we first began, the church was just starting, and so we were able to dedicate a couple days a week to filming. We would dedicate one day to filming, and then we would maybe dedicate another day where I would do all the editing. But as it began to grow, it becomes more complicated, especially if you're on multiple platforms. And so you definitely need a team around you. And so what we do and the way that we train guys, so for our team, Malik is the lead who does most of the content. He'll do a message, he'll read a chapter from the Bible, gives a synopsis at the end of it, and then invite people to follow. That's kind of the main pattern that we began to follow. And then as we began to grow, we're definitely going to need someone else on our team because we're branching out into multiple languages. We're branching out into working with more pastors. And so actually, before we came back on our furlough a year ago, I had asked the Lord to send us someone who was already trained, who already knew how to do videography. He said, Lord, if you could know how to do videography, if he could edit as well, and I don't have to train him, if he could be a graphic designer, that would be great because that would help a lot. If you could, Lord, if you knew how to build websites, that would also be a bonus. And so I gave that to the Lord. 2 weeks later, a young man through his father contacted us seeking. He asked me, I'm looking for a ministry that my son can plug into with these skills. I said, well, what does he do? He said, oh, he's a videographer. He builds websites. He's a graphic designer, and he ran the social media sites for his university. He just graduated, and I'd like him to work in ministry. And I said, well, I think I know somebody. Send him our way. And so we hired John about a year ago. He's done a fantastic job. He does a lot of the editing, the recording. He does all that with Malik. So now what we do is we'll do seminars throughout the country. We'll invite men that are interested in doing online media, and we'll do sessions. So Malik would do a session on how to present the gospel in an Islamic context, so that you kind of have that mentality as you're sharing and who you're reaching. I'll do sessions on, how to articulate, communicate effectively, facial expressions you should have, what your background should look like, things like that. And then a lot of times, if there's a pastor that wants to do online, we'll ask him when he comes to the seminar to bring another person from his church that could help him and partner with them in the recording of it. And then whoever he brings with him, John will take them aside and train them on how to do basic videography, video editing, and then uploading and things like that. And then when it's all said and done during the session, we'll record a few episodes with each pastor, and then we'll help them get a page set up. We'll help with some basic graphic design, and then we'll launch their website or their Facebook page or Instagram or whatever it might be. Now, that being said, some of the hesitation at the beginning for me was, okay, why are we doing this? We don't want to just have a social media site just to have a social media site. We have a very specific objective here in Senegal. We have a goal. We have a philosophy of ministry. We're here to plant churches and to sow the gospel. But one of my prayers when I first arrived in Senegal was that the Lord would use us to reach every person in Senegal with the gospel. And when I prayed that, I didn't know what it would look like. I knew Jesus would reach the masses and the crowds through a plethora of outreach. He would do medical, he would heal people. And we do medical outreach here. He would feed people, and we do distribution of goods for people who need it, things like that. But the point was Jesus was trying to reach people with the gospel. That was the bottom line. And Paul, his desire was to make the gospel accessible to every person on earth. That really is our calling with the gospel, with missions. And so we want to see churches planted, but we also wanted to make the gospel accessible to every person. And the Lord used media as the means by which we can make the gospel accessible. Really, our video views have nearly 30, 40 million views total. And there's 17 million people in Senegal. So the gospel is accessible to reach. Anybody can go online and find us very easily. So that was kind of the outflow of that philosophy and desire. So you have to make sure before you jump into this is something God wants, that it lines up with your philosophy of ministry, the reason why you're doing it. And then our ultimate goal to see churches planted. We want to use this as a tool to reach people with the gospel and to plant churches, just like a carpenter would have a his tool belt, he would have multiple tools, and some tools he goes to more than others, right? Media, when it comes to Islamic evangelism, using media is one of the most effective tools. And anybody you talk to who's worked a long time in Islamic evangelism will tell you media is one of those tools you're going to come back to quite a bit. Medical is a big one, outreach, building relationships, things like that. But media is one of those tools we come back to quite a bit. And now we're using it to not only see people saved and discipled, but we're creating a network of believers where there are no churches, and we're training guys that we'll send to start Bible studies in these areas where we've discipled people, seen them saved, so that we can see churches started. So that's the ultimate goal, is for the glory of Christ, to see churches started, disciples encouraged and edified, and discipled.
So you're seeing, basically what you're doing is that you're because of social media, you're now able to create a following, in a sense, in a certain location, and you're discipling, and you're, oh, okay, there's some people here we want to bring a minister, a pastor to help shepherd in person. And then you're training that pastor to reach that social media group that you've basically has, they've reached out to you, right, in that sense, right? And then because of social media, you've been able to plant that church in that area and also see more souls saved through that medium. That's a wow. I don't think I've ever heard of that before. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's exciting work to be a part of, and to see how you can use modern methods and means to share the timeless message of the gospel.
Yeah, because it's reversed in the sense of, I think before you would send a missionary to a location and they would have to start from scratch of developing connection and developing relationships. You already have connections, you already have relationships through the social media network that you're either, people have already gotten saved through or are in discipleship, and then you're sending a minister to continue that personal discipleship with that person. That's when with that church, right? That's awesome.
Yeah.
That is awesome. And I guess, what advice would you give to missionaries who may be hesitant, I guess, to embrace media in their outreach, or not sure if that's right for their culture, or for their setting, either for security reasons or other, cultural reasons as well?
Yeah, definitely. Depending on where you're located, take your security very serious. Make sure that it's not compromising your security, the security of your ministry, the security of the pastors you might, national pastors you might be working with. Every one of the men that we work with and have trained, I've talked with them, and they understand, because of the demographic of who we're reaching, there can be some opposition, and sometimes it can be intense. These men understand they're putting their face out there, and there's a certain danger that could come with that. Certainly you open yourself up to ridicule, having been a former Muslim, becoming a Christian. But people in this demographic don't always like to see that. And so take those things into consideration. Make sure your security is prioritized. But then I would say, depending on the context of where you're at, go online and look up what other ministries are doing in your area. A lot of times, the prosperity gospel preachers, they have no problem using media to get their message out. They're going to jump on it right away. Those who lean more charismatic, maybe the cults and others who have differing unbiblical views, they have no qualms about using whatever medium is at their fingertips to get their message out. And I think we should, and I think it's biblical as well, use whatever medium we can to share the gospel, to get the gospel and communicate it to people. And so I would say, in my region, what are other ministries doing? And then make sure you have a national partner. If you're a foreign missionary, you don't want to launch out right away. If it's your first term, take your time. We spent 15 years here in Senegal before we launched out. 10 or 12 years in Senegal before we launched out into media. You want to make sure you have a good grasp of whatever language you're going to be speaking in. You want to make sure that you understand the culture and cultural context, so you can be sensitive to that as you post. And so definitely take your time with that, but then figure out, hey, is it something that's effective? Are people online? Is it a effective means to advance what God's called us to do? And if it is, I would say, hey, go forward with it in full force.
Yeah, those are really good, great points. And I guess my next question here would be, how would you encourage local churches, even in the States, to utilize their platform to create impact? Where have you seen, I guess, even, in this media saturated culture over here, how would you encourage us to reach our communities?
I definitely have seen it effectively used as I traveled all across Canada and the U.S. during this past furlough. A lot of pastors are, not only did a lot of churches move online because of COVID, but then they began to see kind of how we can engage our community online. So whether it's through just doing an advertisement, and now stateside, it can get a little more expensive to do advertising online. And there's a lot more noise on certain social media, like Facebook. When I pull it up in the States, it's nothing but ads. It gets really annoying. Here in Senegal, you don't have that as much. And so you really, you don't want to be just background noise amidst a bunch of other noise. You want to try to find a unique approach. One church, they would do advertising for the upcoming sermon to prep. Mostly they would have a group or a page of members to just keep people updated. So you could approach it a couple ways. Use social media to keep your church, and a lot of churches do this already, keep your church updated with what's going on. But definitely you could engage your community using social media with advertising for church events, things like that. So you just have to, I don't know a lot about the pricing. I just know it's a lot more expensive to do it there. And you definitely want to make sure you have high quality content. You can't just throw something together, put it out there if you're going to do it, in North America. There's a lot more competition there. When we started here in Senegal, we were the only ones online. Yeah. And it's not about a competition. We try to equip, we want as many mature believers. We want them online, posting and interacting with people in this community as much as possible. But yeah, when you're stateside, it could be a little more, there's just a lot more noise out there with media and stuff. So you really got to have a niche, find out, what do you want to use it for, and then stick with that. But
right.
That's about as much advice as I would have.
No, you're good. Yeah. I just kind of want to throw that out because I think most of my audience will be American listeners in that sense of they'll be trying to, reach out to their community as well. And so, but of course I'm trying to reach, I want these American listeners to share it with their missionaries, with their church leaders. Because that's truly, it's harder to reach that, that group through, in America. But I guess any final call to action, for pastors, church leaders, church members even, or missionaries, when it comes to just social media, or just spreading the gospel?
Yeah, if you've evaluated that this is an effective means for sharing the gospel in your community, in your region, then set up a budget for it. It can be expensive. You need good equipment. You need good audio. Don't just grab a random phone and start recording. Really put time and effort into it. I would say have a budget dedicated for it, and then find men and women that know what they're doing with media. Bring in some guys, or seek out things like Missionary Media Studios. Seek out men who know what they're doing. And I highly recommend this podcast in Tabor because I think these are things that pastors want to do. They just, where do you begin, right? And so make sure you figure out, okay, is it an effective tool? And I think it is. Right. I think that it can be used in a way, no matter what context, whether you're in North America, whether you're in Africa, wherever you are. I think it's one of the most effective tools today to make initial contact with people. Whether you're in the States and it's a visitor thinking about coming to your church, you want to have a sharp, look on your website. You want to have a social media page that People are impressed by, in the sense that they would say, hey, that seems like a place I would want to visit, maybe a place I could belong. And that's really our approach, is that with the way we do outreach, when we do media, when a Muslim watches our video, we want them to say, okay, that's somebody I could relate to, because they're dressed the way I dress, they're speaking my language, and they're communicating in a way that I comprehend, but the message is different. I've never heard this message before. And that's actually one of the biggest comments we get from Muslim followers is, I've never heard this teaching, but I love it, And so we get a lot more positive feedback than we do negative. Probably 95% of our feedback is positive across the board, because we've taken a very deliberate approach in how we're presenting ourselves and communicating the gospel. So, set a budget, find some men and women who know what they're doing, find somebody that can tutor you, coach you along, mentor you in that area, put a team together, and then have an objective. All right, what do we want to do with this media? What's our goal? What's our approach? And follow through with it. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Josh. Thank you so much just for sharing your insights and your experiences. It is inspiring just to see how media can be just a powerful tool for mission work. And to our viewers watching, thanks so much for joining the Hub. Make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell to never miss another episode. Share this video with your pastors, with your missionaries, to help them find valuable resources to help them spread the gospel to their region as well. Drop a comment below if you'd like for me to personally reach out to your ministry leaders to support them in their journey of understanding how to navigate the digital landscape. Stay tuned, stay motivated, and I'll see you in the next episode. Until then, keep spreading the gospel.